Hello everyone. Now we are going to study and learn something regarding OM info types, transaction codes and plan version. So what are the info types in OM? What are the transaction codes in OM and what is plan version? So this lecture will basically cover the info types in OM, the transaction codes in OM and what is plan version. Let's see the info types in OM. If you recall the personal administration module, we know the info type in personal administration starts with 0000 because SAP has given that range 0000 till 0999 for personal administration info types. But for OM, the range SAP has given is from 1000 till 1999. So the concept of info type is same for both OM as well as PA because the purpose is to store the information. But the purpose of each info type will be different because each info type has its own specific purpose to store the specific information. Like info type 1000. This info type 1000, the name of this is object. What does this info type do? This info type is used to create objects such as department. So info type 1000 is object, which is basically used to create organizational units which are nothing but departments, or it could be group. Now the next info type is 1001, which is nothing but relationships. What is relationship? We already covered in the previous lecture. Like the relationship could be between the org unit to org unit, between position to org unit, or between job and position, and so on. Now the next relationship is 1002, which is description. Like if you want to give some text or describe the org unit, like this org unit is basically the top org unit, or you want to describe some good thing about the org unit, some specific information about the org unit or any object type. So this info type 1002 description can be used for that purpose because it is used to append the text descriptions to different object. Similarly, we have another info type called 1008, which is account assignment. The purpose of this is to store account relevant data such as personal area, company code, sub area and other particular fields. The next info type is 1013, which is employee group subgroup. So in this info type you can assign a position to employee group and employee subgroup. So these were just the important OM info types, although there are a couple of more info types. So 1000, 1001, 1002, 1008 and 1013. These are some of the important OM info types. The concept of info type is same whether it's PA or OM, but each info type purpose is totally different. So when we do practically in OM, I will show you how these info types will be created. Now let's see what are the different transaction codes in OM. If you recall the personal administration module, there were some important transaction codes like PA30 to maintain HR master data, PA40 to create personal action. Similarly, here there are some transaction codes in OM. So these are the important transaction codes. In OM, basically we have three different ways to create the organizational structure. which is basically I will be explaining you in the next lecture. But since it is mentioned here, let me give you a quick brief about that. You can create organizational structure using one of the three interfaces. What are those? First one is expert mode maintenance, second one is simple maintenance, third one is organization and staffing. So these are the three different ways through which you can create organizational structure. So SAP has given you three different ways to create your own organizational structure. If you create the organizational structure using simple maintenance, that organizational structure will automatically get reflected in other interfaces. So you don't have to again create the same structure through this maintenance. No. In any of this interface, maintenance or interface, I would say, when you create an org structure, you can automatically reflect it in other interfaces. Means you will be able to see whatever you have created the org structure through simple maintenance, you will be able to see that in expert mode maintenance, whatever you have created. Similarly, if you create the organizational structure through this interface called organization and staffing, you will be able to see whatever has been created in simple maintenance and expert mode. Means these three interfaces are basically related to each other. Like basically, even if you create the org structure in one interface, you can see in another interface. Now, the third topic is what is plan version. So till now we understood what are the info types in OM and what are the transaction codes in OM. Now let's understand what is plan version. Plan versions are used to maintain and display the organizational structure in different scenarios. So plan version means like you might be when you do something in the real life, like I mean you always term as version 1, version 2, version 3, right? Because you want to compare. So version, similarly here plan versions are basically created to compare the different organizational structure for testing purposes. Let me give you a good example. Like currently probably my company has an org structure, like it might have 10 org units and 50 positions and 10-12 jobs and 500 employees and so on. Now the company wants to add and remove some of the org units and they want to see how it looks like. So they don't want to disturb the current plan version. So what they do, they copy and create a new plan version and they simulate it how the org structure will look like when they remove or add or reorganize it. So that is the reason why we say plan versions are always used to simulate and test and compare the different plans, like so at a time only one plan version will be active. You cannot have all the plan versions active, and it makes sense because at a time only one plan version is active, means that plan version will have the active org units, positions, job, everything within that plan version, means those are currently active in the system. So if you are making any other plan version as active, then this will be deactivated and that will become active. So you can have multiple plan versions, but at a time only one plan version will be active. So this completes our topic of organizational, like the info types, the transaction code and the plan version. Let me show you how to navigate to the info types or transaction codes in OM. So just a second. So let me show you like what are the different info types in OAM and what are the different transaction codes in OAM. Just focus on this screen how I am navigating. Go to human resource here, and then you will see organizational management here. Expand that node, and then you will see here expert mode, simple maintenance, and organization and staffing. So in my slides I told you that there are three different ways to create the organizational structure. One of them is organization and staffing. The second one is the expert mode, which has these particular transaction codes, and third one is the simple maintenance, which has these transaction codes. So these are always, the left hand side are always the transaction codes, right hand side will give you the description of that particular transaction code. So this is basically to create, this transaction code is for change, this transaction code is for display. So these three transaction codes are used under this particular interface called organization and staffing. Similarly, for expert mode, these are the different transaction codes through which we can create the org structure. And similarly, we have simple maintenance. These are the three transaction codes. So either if you know the transaction code, you can directly type up in the command bar, and if you don't know the transaction codes, then you can navigate how I showed you here. So this was the transaction codes. Now let me show you where the info types are stored. So info types are always stored under expert mode. You will not be able to see info types of OAM in organization and staffing and simple maintenance. So info types are always stored in expert mode. So the next lecture is totally focusing on these three interfaces, how we are going to create the org structure through these interfaces. So that time I'll show you what are those info types, how you are going to create that info type. But before that, the most important is the plan version. So we have to create a plan version. So I am going to the IMG SPRO. I click on this IMG here. Because I have to create a plan version. So as I told you, you can create number of plan versions, but at a time only one will be activated. So highlight this personal management and this one. It's taking some time, but normally it should be a bit fast. So you will see organizational management, and there is a global settings in personal management. So you can expand the global settings in personal management. So here you can basically expand this one and maintain the plan versions. So under the personal management, you go to the global settings, and under that you go to the plan version maintenance. So when you click on the maintain plan version here on this particular clock, you can create your own plan version. So let me show you. There will be many plan versions which are already set up in SAP. I mean, you can also create many plan versions, but see, there are so many plan versions here. So what I did, I created one plan version called ZA, which is Zenith plan version. If you see, this is currently active. even though there are all other plan versions, but none of them is active, because I told you there can be many plan versions but only one of them is active. I made this as an active. Now you will be wondering, how did I check mark this box, because this is disabled. I'll tell you how. The plan version is ZA, remember this. Now go back, the second node is set active plan version. This is the place where the system is asking you to set your active plan version. When I click on this one, so when you click this, the next screen which comes up, there you have to enter which plan version you want to make it as an active. So it is taking some time. So if you see here, I entered my plan version name as ZA. So whatever the plan version number you enter here, that becomes the active plan version. That is the reason why in the previous screen it was showing a tick mark on my plan version, which was ZA. Here, if you see here, so if you go back and give some other number, so that particular plan version will be the active plan version. So currently I have given ZA, which is the current and active plan version. This is the active plan version. So in the next section I'll go through the different ways to configure the org structure and also how to create info types. So hope you understood this class and enjoyed. Keep practicing it. Like the more you get familiar with the transaction codes, go to the transaction code, get familiarity of the screen, and also create some examples by yourself, so it will be more and more easy for you. Thank you.